We're here debating choices. They happen to be choices about our budget, about the future of our nation, that will be determined by choices we make about how to invest. That is the key concept at stake in this really momentous moment as we consider choices for how to invest in middle-class financial security and all that goes along with it: job creation, infrastructure, education funding, clean energy research. All of those choices are critical to the future of our nation, and we will make disastrous choices if we adopt the budget that has come to us in the conference report for fiscal year 2016, because it fails to understand the need for investment in our future. We're in danger of leaving a lesser America, an America that for the first time in our history will reflect a lesser nation left to our children and their grandchildren. All generations before us determined that they would sacrifice, that they would give back and pay forward. And yet now, sadly, in fact, tragically, we endanger their future by failing in those investment decisions. The conference agreement would cut trillions of dollars to domestic programs without seeking revenue. In fact, it relies on gimmicks that undermine its integrity. A significant gimmick, for example, of counting $2 trillion in tax revenue from the Affordable Care Act, while at the same time repealing that law. It relies on trillions of dollars in supposed savings without detailing how those savings will be accomplished. At the very least, we owe a measure of integrity to the American people. We can disagree about choices, but at least we should be honest about how revenue is supposed to match the spending that we allocate. The proposal before us would, in fact, repeal the Affordable Care Act, which has already allowed more than 16 million Americans to obtain health insurance, access preventive services, and save money on their premiums. It would cut more than $1 trillion from Medicaid, reversing the expansion that has provided health insurance to millions of America. Too many Americans are still struggling, and yet this budget would cut funding for job training and employment services. It would eliminate the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which provides vital support for small manufacturers in Connecticut and across the country. Time and again, we've learned that education is the key to a brighter future for our children. And yet, tragically, this budget would cut funding across the spectrum of American education, from universal pre-kindergarten, which would be slashed, to college affordability, where loan programs would be decimated. In fact, instead of making college more affordable, this budget decimates two critical programs that would help future students pay back loans. Remember, the average student debt in this country is in the tens of thousands of dollars. In Connecticut, it's about $30,000, conservatively estimated. This budget would increase student loan payments for millions of borrowers, and it would slash Pell Grants, increase the cost of loans, cut the amount of grants available that enable students to avoid borrowing. In fact, it would cut the Pell Grant program by nearly 30% and eliminate other important federal subsidies. These monies are not spending their investments in our future, the futures of those students whose hopes and dreams will be constrained and undercut and killed, but also the future of our capacity to manufacture and compete around the globe, because what we have more than any other nation is really smart, skilled people. That's why companies are coming back to this nation after outsourcing. One of these programs, the Pay-As-You-Earn program, caps monthly student loan payments at a level that's proportionate to their earnings and forgives debt after 20 years of repayment. But the Republican budget would require cuts to this program in a way that could increase required monthly payment increases of more than 50% to some borrowers, and it paves the way for eliminating the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which assists students with debt payments for those who go into public service professions such as teaching, firefighting, policing. This program ought to be especially close to our heart because we purport to be engaged in public service and to provide role models for young people who engage in public service. I'm particularly concerned about this program's impact on our railroads, roads, bridges, airports. We know those facilities as infrastructure, the magic word around here, infrastructure. In fact, we had a hearing just this morning in the Commerce Committee on the importance of fully funded long-term investments in our nation's highway, transit, and rail systems. We heard testimony from the public and private sector about how important a revitalized and reinvigorated transportation network is for American competitiveness, American businesses, American professionals to compete in the world. And yet, through this budget, we will not only sanction, we will encourage and enable an inadequate investment in infrastructure. The budget conference report before us would cut funding for highways and mass transit by 40% over the next decade. There may be no more important fact to know about this budget. And so I regret that I will vote against this budget because I would have wished, like many of my colleagues, that we could reach a bipartisan measure that will embody the best in America, not encourage a retreat from our public obligation. In fact, I think America is ready to invest, ready to give back and to pay forward. And in fact, I believe that our wealthiest Americans are ready to do more and approve closing loopholes and ending subsidies, not making blanket cuts to vital programs, not cutting taxes for millionaires, as this budget would create a pathway to do, not forcing another 12 million middle-class families and students to pay for college by ending the American Opportunity Tax Credit or adding $1,100 more in burdens to them, and not forcing 16 million middle-class families to pay a $900 tax hike in ending the expansions of the Earned Income Tax Credit and Child Tax Credit. I think our most fortunate Americans are ready to pay forward and do more and invest and, in fact, make more sacrifices, which is the way this budget ought to be arranged. And it isn't even a matter of sacrifices on the part of anyone. It's ending the subsidies for outsourcing to ensure that everyone pay their fair share without those hidden tax breaks and subsidies that can be closed. I hope we can do better than this. I urge my colleagues to join me in opposing the budget conference report. Thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor.